Thanks, Tom. And I wanted to take a minute to thank everyone for coming in today. This is our second annual event. Last year we had a much smaller scale. We got great feedback, so we decided to try to go slightly bigger. And it's great to see that the level of interest and the willingness from you folks to come in and spend some time with us to hear about mobile. So thank you very much for coming, and we're really looking forward to having a conversation around what's happening in the mobile space. I'll start with a couple more questions. Specifically, last year we focused very much around the business-to-consumer type of applications, and this year we'll continue focusing on that as well. But the theme for this year is also how B2C, the trends that we're seeing in the B2C space, are actually going to start migrating into the business-to-enterprise space, and how enterprise or employee-focused applications are going to start popping up, or employee-focused use cases for mobile. So with that being said, I'd like to ask you a couple additional questions to the clickers. So question number one, where are you in regards to your B2C mobile journey? So have you started? Have you started just developing a strategy? Are you executing? Are you well underway, or you're launched and measuring success? Okay, so we'll close it. And so very interestingly, we have 11% haven't started yet. The majority, 33%, are starting to develop a strategy. 23% are executing. 11% are well underway. And 23% are launched and measuring success. So a good mix of people. Still, it's a relatively new technology, so we expect to see some leaders and some fast followers. Now, I'd like to ask a similar question, but now instead of focusing on B2C and consumer applications that you're deploying out on the stores, where are you in the B2E journey? So have you deployed any applications, or have you started looking at leveraging mobile devices internally within your enterprise? Okay, so we'll close it. And so different mix of answers. And this is quite honestly, I didn't know this was going to happen, but not surprising. We've seen a lot of focus on the B2C space. It's obviously that's the area where there's lots of interest and a lot of time being spent. The B2E space is an area where we think there's a great deal of opportunity, but it's going to follow on what's happening in the B2C space. So, 29% haven't even looked at it. 40% of you are started to develop a strategy, and 6% are well underway. 17% already launched and measuring seeing some success. My final question before I go into my presentation, what are the areas that interest you the most? Are you looking to use mobile to reach out to customers? If you had to prioritize your mobile initiatives, are you looking to reach new existing customers? Are you looking to acquire new customers? Are you looking to increase employee productivity? Or are you looking to figure out a way of being more efficient with your partners? So a couple more seconds, and I'll close it. So very interestingly, in terms of what's more interesting, obviously reaching out to customers is a top priority. But we're also starting to see that folks are interested in how they can increase employee productivity through the use of mobile devices. So that I think is a great intro into my presentation. Yeah, forgot. We actually asked you the same question last year, and you can see the comparison from last year to this year. There's a huge increase in the interest around B2E, so that's great to see. Still a fair amount of interest in using mobile either to reach existing customers or acquire new customers. So with that being said, I'll switch over to my presentation. And what I want to tackle today, I'll share with you today, is some trends that we're seeing around mobile. And as I said earlier, how do those trends we're seeing in B2C space, how do they map to the employee space? And how do we see these things and these new technologies are growing, getting wide adoption? How do we see them transcending into the B2E space, and how they'll affect the way we interact with our employees and with business partners? So With that being said, I'll get started. This is my favorite chart. Many of you have probably seen it in previous presentations of mine. It's a very interesting chart. It was published by the New York Times back in 2008, and it essentially tracks the adoption of different technologies over time. How quickly a particular technology reached mass adoption. In this case, it's in the US, and it's probably a good sample of the global, of how technology got adopted globally. And the main point of the chart, the reason the New York Times published it, was that if you look at the right-hand side of the chart, technologies in general get adopted much quicker today than they did 100 years ago. So if you compare the telephone, which back in the 1900s, it took it roughly 90 years to reach 90% adoption. Now you compare that to the cell phone, which launched in 1985 roughly, it got to 90% adoption within 15 years. So new technologies get adopted much quicker today than they did 100 years ago. So that was kind of the reason that the New York Times put it out there. But I actually like looking a little deeper into the data. There's a couple of very interesting patterns that come out that apply very much to where we are today in mobile. So the first one is looking at the depression back in the 30s. There's a severe depression back there, and people were actually giving up a lot of these things. So if you look at that period of time, and you look at what you would call mature technologies, electricity, the car, the stove, all of these technologies, you see a very significant dip in terms of their adoption. People stopped buying cars. They actually were giving the cars away. They stopped using electricity. They were actually using less electricity than they were. Less households had electricity than they did before the Great Depression. There's only one technology that throughout the 1930s doesn't slow down at all, and that's the radio. Even though you would think that the radio is discretionary spending, that people didn't need to purchase radios, and they could go on with their lives without a radio, people kept buying radios even though economically they might have not spent that money on anything else. So keep that in mind. Now let's take a look at mobile devices in the 2007-2010 time period. So this is a chart that tracks BlackBerry and iPhone shipments over that period of time, monthly shipments over that period of time. And again, I highlighted our own recession, the downturn that we had back in 2008. And again, very interestingly enough, BlackBerry shipments continued at a steady state. The iPhone shipments have a bit of an interesting graph. It has mostly to do with the fact that this is the 3G, the iPhone 3 announcement. So there's a lot of pent-up demand for the iPhone 3. It's a huge spike up, and then because everyone who was on AT&T who bought an iPhone got their iPhone 3, and then no one else could buy anything because it wasn't available anywhere else. The demand kind of slowed down a little bit. But nonetheless, every month through that one-year period of severe economic downturn, both iPhone and BlackBerry sold, every month they sold more mobile devices than they sold at any point in time prior to that. So the adoption curve of mobile throughout this economically difficult times did not slow down at all. So same as the radio in the 1930s, people kept buying it regardless of what was happening economically. People are buying mobile devices throughout 2008, throughout the economic recession, regardless of what was happening economically. Now, why is that? Very likely because both radio and mobile are social. They have a very strong social element. Back in the 30s, the way that you kept abreast of what was going on in the world was through the radio. The families got around the radio and listened to programming and news, etc. That was a way of keeping in touch socially with what's going on around the world around you. Same thing with mobile devices. We use today mobile devices primarily in a social fashion. We talk to other people, we Twitter, we Facebook, we email, etc. So it's become a critical part of our social interactions. As a result, it's no longer discretionary. It's integral to what we do. The other interesting pattern that comes out of this chart that I'd like to share with you is what I call complementary technologies. So you look at the washer and the dryer. There's about a 20-year head start. The washer the washing machine has a 20-year head start to the dryer. Yet they both reach adoption roughly, the same level of adoption roughly at the same time. So even though the washer has a 20-year head start, the dryer comes along and catches up much quickly. So the adoption of a complementary technology, it takes some time to convince people the value proposition of a washing machine. But once people had washing machines, it wasn't that hard to sell them on the notion of having a dryer. So the adoption of the complementary technology is much faster, and it starts displacing the old technology. So the dryer displaced the clothesline. Similarly, if you look at TV and VCR, we see a similar pattern. TV adoption is fast, no question about that, but VCR adoption is actually faster. Same concept. Once people got the value of having a TV, it wasn't that hard to convince them of how the value of having a VCR that will allow you to record live TV, that you could watch movies while at home, etc. So people were willing to buy this complementary device much faster. And again, the VCR displaced, I don't know if it displaced, but had major impact on the pre-existing technology. It had a major impact on the TV networks, on how their ad sales and stuff like that. It had a major impact on the movie theater and the movie industry in terms of VCRs and DVDs, etc. So complementary technology, much faster adoption than the original technology, and it's actually displacing something else. Now, in the mobile space, we're seeing a very similar pattern again. Think of the iPhone and the iPad. iPad, as Tom mentioned in his chart, the iPad is actually selling much faster than the iPhone selling. So this again tracks the number of units sold every quarter since launch of iPhone and iPad. And as you can see, iPad on a comparative basis is selling faster, selling on a per quarter basis. Apple's selling more iPad devices than they sold iPhone devices in the same quarter since launch. Again, similar type of concept. People bought their iPhones, they love their iPhones, and there wasn't a big stretch to go and say, I can see a value in a complementary technology like an iPad that is going to give me all the great things I get with my iPhone, plus all this other value. So we're seeing that significant adoption. We're also seeing iPads starting to have an impact on the existing technology. So we're seeing iPads starting to displace, tablets starting to displace the old technology. This is a chart that tracks the impact of people who buy a tablet device. How does it impact all the other devices that they use? And surely enough, it's over here on the right-hand side, where laptop computers and desktop computers are the ones that are getting the most displacement. People are, up to 35% of people are saying, I'm using significantly less my desktop machine, my laptop, because I have purchased this tablet. So we're seeing this displacement. The tablet is coming on very, very strong, and it's displacing the old technology, and it's going to have significant impact on how we work, because people are moving away from their desktops into these tablet devices. On a shipment number of units shipped, we're actually, this has been a seminal year. This is the first year where smartphone devices or mobile devices will actually, the number of mobile devices shipped on a worldwide basis will actually exceed the number of PCs shipped. As a matter of fact, the fourth quarter of 2010 was the first quarter where more mobile devices were shipped than PCs. This is going to be the first year on a full year basis that we're going to see that. So we're seeing that trend continue very, very strongly, and we're going to start seeing the impact of that trend make its way into every one of our enterprises. So that's those are macro trends. Like to talk a little bit, take a step down into why are these things, why are we seeing these types of adoption? Why is this trend such a strong trend in terms of people using these devices, and what's driving this usage? And if we understand what's driving this usage, hopefully we can understand what do we need to do to leverage it and to build up and to create value through adopting these things. So we've identified 6 key trends, and I'll spend a little bit of time on each as far as what's driving this significant mobile adoption. The first one is obviously apps. There's a huge impact of apps, and it's changed how we think about interacting with computing devices. Cloud and what's happening as far as mobile devices and the cloud. We'll talk a little bit about collaboration and what impact collaboration is having on how we use these things. Instrumentation, these devices have a lot of instruments, lots of sensors in them that can be used for very, very interesting usages and very powerful usages. Machine to machine, the fact that these devices are actually communicating and can communicate with one another without human intervention, and we can start monitoring things, people, places through these devices and be much smarter about the decisions we make. And then finally, context awareness, the fact that these devices have a lot of knowledge about our context. I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by context and how that context can allow us to make much smarter decisions around how we use or how we actually interact on a daily basis. So I'll spend a little bit of time on each of these. First one, apps. And this is not a technology discussion. I'm not here to talk about native app development versus web app development versus using a middleware type of development. This is just about the concept of apps, and the way that we use apps is different than the way we use the web. The web is about finding information. The web is about, when my 5-year-old asks me, how does the weatherman know it's going to rain tomorrow? And I don't have the answer, Google is there to search that information, search that vast repository of knowledge, get that answer, get it quickly. Apps are about getting the information you already know you want, but getting an updated version of that. I need the stock quote of what's IBM doing, what's the weather going to be in Toronto, what's the status of my flight. This is not, you're not searching a vast array of information to get an answer. You already know what you're looking for. You're just trying to get an updated version of that. Apps are much better at that. They simplify the interaction significantly. So if you know what you're looking for, if you know what you want, you're just trying to get a new version of it. You're trying to get the updated real-time information. Apps are much, much better than web. And then we're seeing that in terms of the adoption. There's a very widely circulated report from Flurry. Flurry is a company that does analytics for mobile devices. And they put out a report that shows that when smartphones first launched, when the iPhone first launched, the usage patterns were 65% of the time people were using the phone to browse the web, and only 30% of the time they were using it for using apps. Over a period of a year or two, it's actually flipped. People are using these phones mostly through apps. The data usage of these phones is being driven mostly through apps, and less so than traditional web browsing. And again, that's because apps give you that immediacy that allow you to get that thing you're trying to get done very quickly, very effectively. So thinking of that and looking at how the appification of the internet is going to apply to the enterprise, there's obviously easy things we can do in the enterprise space. There's obviously you got to start thinking of an app-centric approach to deploying to supporting employee interaction. So there's easy stuff. Business intelligence. Cognos just recently launched an iPad and iPhone compatible version of their product. You can do dashboards and all sorts of information. Again, you know what you want. You're trying to look at a sales report. You're trying to look at a customer profile. You know exactly what you want. You want to try to get. You want to see the latest information. You want to get to it quickly, effectively. There's nothing better than an application for that. Back to that Flurry report, one very interesting thing that came out of it is the increase in app usage was not driven by longer sessions. So it wasn't that people were running the apps longer and therefore there was more app usage. They're actually still using apps for short bursts of time. They're just using it more and more and more. Air Canada is a good example. The number of flight status requests that they get out of their mobile platform out of a single mobile device is significantly higher than they get out of a traditional web application, because people have their phone, they're trying to find out what their flight status is, so they're just going to keep hitting it over and over and over. Same type of usage patterns we're seeing in the enterprise. You put out a dashboard, or you put out some sort of application that allows people to see real-time the status of something that is important to them. You can bet they're going to start hitting that on very regularly and try to get to that very often. So one piece of advice when you're looking at identifying the applications you want to deploy on the enterprise side, it's very important to identify that use case that makes sense. Not everything that we do as employees it makes sense to do on a mobile device. What you want to do is spend the time to understand what are the type of things that the employees could do on a mobile device they could actually do more effectively on the go through their phones, and then make sure you capture that use case very effectively and you provide a solution that allows them to do it very, very effectively. Someone was just telling me yesterday of a scenario of a company that was Mercedes-Benz credit checks. So you're at the dealership. You're looking at this nice shiny car. You know, they're this close to closing the sale, and the challenge is always, well, okay, now we got to take you away from the shiny car into this little desk area so we can actually do all the paperwork. So what they've done is they've taken all this paperwork, the credit checks, the ordering processing, all of that, they've actually put it on an iPad. So the sales agent can be standing there with the iPad next to the shiny car. So while you're still focused on the shiny car, they're doing all the credit checks, they're doing everything, they're actually closing the sale. So again, you're trying to capture one use case, one value proposition, and do that very, very well. And you can drive significant value out of that. The other thing that we're seeing with apps is the devices are now transitioning from being specific to an application to becoming platforms for many, many applications. So traditionally, we used to think of mobile deployment as being single function. So as an enterprise, we would deploy BlackBerries to everyone because we wanted everyone to have access to their email. If you're a company that has a field force, you would deploy rugged devices with a particular application specific to that rugged device for a particular subgroup of people that could do something with that specific device. And if you had two different groups of people with two different needs, you would buy two different sets of hardware. For example, we did a project with a local hydro company a few years back. And we actually had to go in and buy specialized hardware. Then we had to go buy additional, that hardware had to have a barcode scanner in it because we need to do some barcode scanning, so that cost extra. Then we had a 3-week debate over should we have a QWERTY keyboard or a numeric keyboard, because 90% of the forms were numeric, but there's 3 forms that required alphanumeric input. So now you're actually buying an alphanumeric device that is not very usable for 90% of the time, because you gotta enter alphas 10% of the time. And then we had to spend months writing software to deal with the fact that this device was not connected all the time. You need to be able to work on online mode, offline mode, etc. So a very single-purpose device that was built, designed, and deployed for a very specific group of people. And if there was another group of people that wasn't doing asset, in that case, we were doing asset monitoring. So the group of people that wasn't doing asset monitoring, but they were doing servicing home clients, they needed a different device with different specifications to do something else. And now you had to manage all these things. Well, the reality is that with these new devices, that's changing. The new devices, the iPhone, the Android, the BlackBerry devices, all of them are now platforms that you can actually drop applications onto and write specific applications to fulfill a specific function. And you can standardize against the platform and then drop the different application to different people based on their functional need. So Lowe's is a perfect example of this. They announced recently they're deploying 42,000 iPhones. And they're giving an iPhone to every single one of their employees at the store. Now, what's key about that is not just that they're deploying the iPhone, but that iPhone is going to have different types of applications. It's going to have an inventory management application where they can do scan an item and check the inventory levels at the store, at the warehouse. It will have point of sale type of functionality where you can actually process the transaction, a sale transaction through the device. It will have HR functionality, so employees can do some of their HR functions on the device. This one device that they're going to deploy, one deployment, one management structure for all these devices is actually going to provide different functionality for different user groups through apps. Cloud. Cloud is another big buzzword, and there's lots of great stuff that it brings to the table. I like to spend a little bit of time thinking a little bit about different things that cloud has to offer, and I don't want to go too far into this. But one thing that you can do with the cloud is what we call sync. You can take, and iCloud does this very, very well, you can take the information you have on one device, and through the cloud you can sync that information with all your other devices. So you can share your documents, your spreadsheets, or whatever it is you have on the device. You can easily share that with all your other devices. And if you don't want to use iCloud, there's other vendors out there, Dropbox, Box.net, etc. Now, great functionality, from a user point of view, amazing. From an IT point of view, you gotta think about this, because you now can take information that's sitting on your secured machine that, in our case, has very strong encryption, and everything is encrypted down at the hard drive level. And now I can drop this very sensitive file, put it on Dropbox, and magically it appears on my iPad, which is great. It makes it very easy to present things to the customer. But now I have sensitive information sitting on a cloud server here somewhere that I may or may not be able to control. So there's some security and privacy implications you have to think about as things like mobile syncing start coming into play, and people are actually using this. And in many of our discussions that we've had with different CIOs, the reality is people are doing this. So it's not so much about whether people are going to do it or not. People are doing it. How do you control it? And what are the risks involved with that? What I get very excited about, though, is what I call mobile stream. And that's the notion where actually there's nothing on your device. You'll never actually have any sensitive data on your device because everything's sitting on the cloud. You just stream it down to your device at the time that you need it, do with it whatever you need, and then it goes back to the cloud. So especially for hospitals, banks, any entity that has strong privacy regulation around them. We've talked to a number of hospitals where they have concerns about patient data. A doctor wants to see patient data, patient record, so he emails it to his BlackBerry through his public email account, and now you have private data sitting on an unsecure device that you can't control, and there's real exposure there. Well, the notion of having a mobile stream where actually everything's sitting on the cloud, and you just bring it down to the phone, you interact with it on the phone in a native fashion, but the interaction is secure, and as soon as you're done with it, it goes back to the cloud, and there's nothing actually resident to the phone. That could actually solve a lot of these privacy and security concerns and really bring the power of the cloud onto the phone in a way that is secure. And there's people doing it on the consumer side. This is happening already. Google Docs does this very well. You can edit a Google Doc, whether it's on your phone or on your PC or on your tablet, very, very effectively. And there's nothing resident on your phone. It's all cached locally. And as soon as you're done, it's saved on the server. Amazon does this as well with their cloud player. They're on the, it's more on the music and on the book side. But actually, your library of music is sitting on the cloud. You don't actually have anything on your phone, and it's just streaming it down as you need it. So as bandwidth increases and as these devices become more powerful, this metaphor can actually be very applicable on the enterprise side. Next is mobile collaboration, and again, this is an area that has great potential. There is a whole generation of employees coming into the workforce for whom social interactions are through things like Facebook and Twitter. That's the norm. That's how they interact. That's how they gather information. That's how they support one another. So it's very important to start thinking about social business and how that is a paradigm for collaboration within the enterprise. Now, again, I'm not here to pitch social business, but what I do want to point out is that mobile is a key factor in how people interact socially. So if you look at Facebook, for example, in 2 years, since 2009 to now, they've gone from 50 million mobile users to 200 million mobile users. There's another social network in Japan called Mixi. That's the leading social network there. 85% of their page views are coming from a mobile device. So when you start thinking about bringing social into the enterprise and using the social paradigm to enhance communications between employees and to allow employees to support one another, you gotta really consider the fact that mobile is going to be the key driver behind that. That's how people interact. That's how people support one another. So very much another pattern, another theme that we're seeing in the consumer space that is going to very quickly come into play in the enterprise side. Instrumentation. This is an area that also offers, I think, a great deal of possibility. So I'd like to ask you a question. I don't have the polling for this, but anyone care to guess how many sensors or signal processors are embedded in a traditional smartphone? How many different ways of acquiring information does a smartphone have? Anyone care to guess? 12? Not bad. Not bad. Anyone else? I counted 15. And when I showed this to my team yesterday, they advised me that I missed 2. So they came up with 17 different types of input sensors. So whether it's the different radios, GSM, Bluetooth, NFC, et cetera, the microphone, camera, accelerometer, the touch screen, there's a proximity sensor that I missed, et cetera. There's lots of ways of gathering input from mobile devices. And what that means is we can find very innovative ways of taking this input and doing something with it. So we all know about Shazam, about how you can hold the phone against the radio and it will identify the music, the song that you're listening to. And we all know about Square, the little dongle that fits into the earplug, the jack, and you can actually process credit card transactions. But all these inputs processors offer all sorts of different ways of doing things. So for example, identification. We all know passwords are the weakest link in security, in our security infrastructure. People have to put in passwords, and if you break the password, then you're in. Well, think about replacing passwords with biometrics. And you know what? The phones already have that capability. We have cameras that you can use to do face recognition. We have microphones that you can use to obtain voice prints and do voice recognition against. And imagine the day when instead of you having to type in a password onto the mobile device, you talk to the phone, you say, "Hi, I'm Alon Kronenberg." That identifies you as the user, and now that phone, you take that phone and you can use that to log on to anything else via the NFC chip. So now you've actually secured the individual. Instead of securing through a password, you've actually secured the individual through a voice print, a biometric reading, and you've said, now I know with 100% certainty that Alon is holding the phone, and I can take this phone and use it to identify myself to any of the other systems. The same thing we're seeing with data entry. People are using camera and barcode scanning in ways instead of actually typing things into the phone. I remember hearing about a food service store that is using the cameras on the iPhones. They're taking pictures of the food before it goes out for delivery to actually as a quality control measure. They're actually doing quality control checks by taking pictures of the food before it goes out and actually evaluating it and measuring the different franchises by the quality, how the food looks on its way out. So there's lots of very interesting ways of taking the information and capturing information and then changing the way we process that information. Mobile-to-mobile monitoring, the notion of things being interconnected. There is lots of areas in this space, asset monitoring, where you put RFID tags on assets, and now you can monitor where they are. Rogers recently launched a home monitoring application where the house is actually sending all sorts of signals, and you can manage that through a mobile interface. An area where there's lots of possibilities in the healthcare area, where these devices, these medical devices, are at home. People are using them as they do today. But each of these devices is actually sending signals and letting people, sending signals to a server farm around a particular individual's glucose level on that day, their weight, their blood pressure. All these things are actually being measured, automatically monitored, and if something doesn't look right, then an alert goes out to a clinician to say, here's something you need to look at. So instead of it being the responsibility solely of the patient to monitor these things, and if something doesn't look right, pick up the phone and call somebody, these things are actually monitoring themselves, and you can actually start being proactive around how you provide healthcare. And there's huge implications into healthcare and all sorts of other areas where you can actually start monitoring things, people, things, places automatically and be more proactive around how you react to them. And then finally, context awareness. Everyone thinks of location-based services, and yes, location is an interesting thing, but location is just one element of context. Your phones can provide you information around identity, about location, spatial information, temporal information, environmental information, resources, etc. So think about applications that actually use all this information to be smart around what they're doing. So I'll give you an example, calendar. We all have our phones. We all have our calendars in our phones. I don't know you, but in my case, all my calendar entries are set to give me a warning 10 minutes before the meeting that there's a meeting coming up, so I'm ready for it. Well, that's fine, that's good, but it's dumb also. It doesn't take into account my situation. So take an example. I'm traveling out of town. My phone's on roaming, so if I make a voice call, it's going to cost me an arm and a leg. If the phone knows that, and it knows that, because it knows it's roaming, and the phone knows that I have a call that I need to make in 10 minutes, instead of giving me the warning 10 minutes in advance, maybe it should give me a warning 15 minutes in advance. And by the way, tell me, you have a conference call coming up, you may want to hook up to the Wi-Fi signal and switch over to voice over IP so you can actually save yourself some money. Another example is I'm at the office, I have a call scheduled at 5:30, but I also have a personal appointment at 6 o'clock at home. It says, wife says, be home at 6 o'clock or die. So it'll be good if the phone actually read that and said, you know what, you probably want to take that 5:30 call in the car on the way home. And by the way, your battery is very low, so you want to charge that phone ahead of time so that you don't run out of signal while you're driving on the way home. And use all that context and give me that warning ahead of time so I actually be smarter around managing my calendar appointments. And there's possibilities are endless in terms of taking more than just the location, but taking your full context and being smart about it and offering you and giving you something more valuable and more valuable information or smarter information by taking all this context and taking into account as decisions are being made. So instrumented, interconnected, and intelligent. Ultimately, the mobile devices are a way of getting to a smarter planet. I guess I had to say that because it's an IBM event. But no, it's truly the fact is these devices can allow us to be much more effective in our interactions. Obviously, we're seeing in the consumer space, we're going to see that wave coming into the enterprise space, and it's going to allow us to be much more effective in the way we work. So with that, if there's any questions? No questions? Okay, I guess no questions. Thank you very much. I appreciate, again, your time. And there's my contact information. You can scan the QR code, and it's got my email address and phone, if you like, to contact me at any point in time. And with that, I think I'm going to ask Tony to come up. Tony Olved is a vice president at IDC, and he is going to talk to us a little bit about the mobile device space, specifically in Canada. We had IDC last year as well. A lot of very interesting data that is hard to come by because typically Canada gets put together with the US and it skews it. So IDC actually has Canadian-specific data, and we're going to ask Tony to take us through that.